Now, if you're divorcing a narcissist and you're getting ready to go mediate a case, or even if you're not divorcing a narcissist, but you are mediating a case with a narcissist, maybe it's a former business partner or something, all the same rules will apply here. And so the very first thing that you're going to want to think about is be way over prepared. This is one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make in mediations. And what happens is they think, well, we're just having a conversation. We're just sitting down. Let's just see what they have to say. I'll just tell them what I have to say. And, we'll just take it from there and hopefully we'll get it resolved. Big mistake. You definitely need to have a very clear strategy. You need to have your leverage ready to go. You need to be anticipating what they're going to say. And you need to be focusing on you. Those are that's my acronym for S.L.A.Y, by the way: strategy, leverage, anticipate, and focus on you. And you want to slay that negotiation. And so be over prepared, prepare as if you're going to trial. You need to have everything ready to go. Your research has been done. You know what your position is. You know what their position is. You're anticipating what their position is going to be. And you have your arguments ready to go. You have your valuations, you have your appraisals, you have the supporting documentation for all of the information. You have an asset and liability exhibit ready to go. You have your arguments ready to go. You have your first offer ready to go. And it better be a whole lot more than what you're going to be willing to accept, right? So you have all of that ready to go. And that means that you're over prepared. And that means that you'll be ready. Okay, so that's step number one. Okay, so step number two is be ready with leverage. And a lot of people say to me, what does leverage mean? How do you get that? And what leverage really just is, kind of like a squeeze that you can put on the other person to get them to be motivated and incentivized to want to come to the table and have a conversation with you. And it's different for every person. So it's kind of hard to say, oh, this is it. But what you do is you look at what is motivating this person the most. Is it money? Is it power? Is it controlling you? Is it that they want time with the kids? Is it that which usually when you're dealing with a narcissist, it's not time with the kids. They'll say it's time with the kids, but they don't actually really care about the kids because they don't care about anybody but themselves. So just be aware of that one. But it might be, that they look bad. They don't want to look bad. It may be that they want to move on and be with another person. It may be that they want you back or something. And you kind of use that to your advantage too. Some people don't like the idea of creating leverage because they say, I don't want to fight. And, most everybody who comes into my office says, I don't want to fight. I just want what's fair. Well, everybody has a different idea of what's fair. And that's what happens. And that's why people end up fighting. Right. So, and especially when you're dealing with a narcissist, because they have these grandiose ideas of what's fair and they bolster their contributions to things and minimize yours. So, figuring out what their leverage is going to be really, really important as well. So that's number two. And number three is don't stay in the same room. A lot of times we start off in the same room, but I really highly suggest that you don't stay in the same room. Sometimes it's easier for the mediator to just give their opening spiel like one time, what the day is about and all about the mediator. I've practiced law for X number of years and I've been mediating for this many years and here's how many mediations I've done. And, it saves them from having to say it twice. But I don't recommend staying in the same room with someone who can push your buttons, who knows how to get under your skin, and they're really, really good at it. And even, as self-disciplined as you are, and going back to step number one, the more you're prepared, the less emotional you'll be, so the easier the day will be for you. So definitely make sure that you're over prepared. But staying in the same room will just probably cause you headache and heartache, and you probably won't settle your case if you do stay in the same room anyway. So we do what we call caucusing, which means that the mediator goes back and forth and you're in one room, either by yourself if you don't have representation, or you have your lawyer there with you if you have representation. but then the mediator just goes back and forth. And what's great about that is the mediator can kind of work as a filter. They'll come back and present information to you in a very neutral way, without all of the drama and without the emotion involved and without the manipulation piece involved, and all that sort of thing. And especially if that narcissist has been a bully and controlling, you really don't want that, because they will probably trigger you. Okay. So tip number 3 would be not to stay in the same room. Okay, so tip number 4 is to not bring other people with you unless you've cleared them ahead of time with the other side. You probably won't be allowed to keep that person there. The mediator has a duty to disclose who's in the other room. And, if the other side objects to having that person there, then you're going to have to make that person leave. So, I would definitely not bring someone unless you've cleared it ahead of time. Unless it's somebody who's involved in the process. I mean, obviously, if it's a forensic accountant or a custody evaluator or somebody who's involved with the process, then they're going to be allowed to stay. But anybody else will be kicked out of the room. Which of these ideas have you liked the best so far? Just drop a link in the comment, or just drop a little comment below and say, oh, I like this one so far the best. But stay with me, because the best ideas are coming. Okay, number 5, I talked about this a little bit in number 1 when I talked about being overprepared, but number 5 is having your first offer ready to go. And it should definitely be way, way more than what you're going to be willing to settle for, because, narcissist is going to think that they got the best of you. So, decide ahead of time what you're going to be willing to part with, and then, put that into the offer. Also decide ahead of time what your choke point is going to be. I've had a client one time call it the vomit point, but that's okay. Basically, at what point are you going to stand up and say, I've had enough? And a lot of that is going to depend on what the law provides. So, if the law provides that you got permanent alimony after a certain number of years of marriage, and you definitely know a court's going to order that, and the other side says, I'm not paying you a penny of alimony, and that's never going to happen, and I'll wait for the judge to order me to pay you. Well, okay, then maybe don't settle that piece of the case. And you can settle parts of cases. Some lawyers don't like to do that. Some do. But you can just take the parts to the judge that you haven't settled. Okay, so, but once you have gotten a resolution, and let's say you've given away what you've already decided ahead of time that you were willing to part with anyway, act like that was like the worst thing in the world for you. Like you just cut off your right arm in order to give that person that thing. Because if they think that you got the best of them, or it was okay, you didn't care about giving that up anyway, then they're not going to settle, because they want to feel like they got the best of you. Unfortunately, you kind of have to check your ego at the door when you're dealing with a narcissist like this. Okay, and the last tip is something I've alluded to before, and if you're a regular viewer of my videos, you know that what I'm going to say, right? And that is to keep your emotions in check. It's so important, because as soon as you lose your cool, as soon as you are crying, screaming, yelling, screaming back, calling them names, getting down into the dirt with them, then they know that they have you. One of the things that drives a narcissist the most crazy is when you aren't moved by their antics and you don't respond. They can't stand it, because narcissists want attention. They want to know that they have control over you. So stay non-emotional. And of course, it's much easier to do if you're in separate rooms. Let's dive into unmasking narcissists for Jedi Tactics to crush narcissists in mediation. What do we start with here? We start with powerful body language. Powerful body language. If you walk into a negotiation and a mediation and you are fearful of them, they can tell, they can read you, they can read that body language on you. And I want you, even if you are sweating, even if you are scared, even if you are like dying, here are some ways that you can show up for yourself in a way that looks powerful. Right. So remember, we're on our mission to right this ship, to course correct. I talk about step one, don't run. Step two, make a U-turn. Step three, break free, right? And if you haven't heard me say this before, it's step one is where you stop that conditioning, stop that retreating. You're going to start walking forward instead of backward. And this is where you're going to start drawing boundaries and start doing some things that are uncomfortable. Small changes, but pivotal. Step two, make a U-turn, where you're going to start turning things around, starting to create leverage, start planning for negotiations and shifting that dynamic of power. And then step three is breaking free, where you start walking forward and you start presenting your offers. You actually start speaking. You actually start reclaiming your sense of self, slowly but surely, knowing that somewhere inside of yourself that you never left. And that's that really authentic power, which totally beats their fake power every single time. How can you have some nonverbal communication, that power body language? You walk in, you've got eye contact. You look at them and you go, you know what? I'm not afraid of you. I'm here. I'm looking at you. And you're going, hello, I see you. I'm here. And you go, you stick out your hand, you shake their hand, depending on who it is that you're dealing with. You're showing them, I'm strong, I'm powerful. Confident handshake. And that's the only appropriate expression of touch. Now, I'm talking about this. This is not if you are in a domestic violence situation. You do not need to do that, obviously. For the most part, I think that in a mediation situation, you should be in separate rooms. I think that you should do something that I call caucusing. Other than for the opening, let the mediator do their little opening spiel. Hi, I'm the mediator. This is your day of opportunity. This is who I am, blah, 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 blah. That's all you need to do. Separate rooms for the rest of the time. Other than that, you can just walk in. I'm powerful. Attention to all of you who have ever felt trapped by a narcissist. Are you struggling in a relationship with a narcissist and feeling powerless or paranoid and not sure what to do? It is time to take back control and flip the script on their game. I want to introduce to you the ultimate solution to breaking free from the grip of narcissistic manipulation. Join me for a groundbreaking webinar called The 3 Must-Have Secrets to Communicating with a Narcissist. Hi, my name is Rebecca Zung, and I've been recognized by U.S. News as one of the best lawyers in America, and I'm a globally recognized narcissist negotiation expert, and I've spent years studying and mastering the art of negotiating with narcissists. I know firsthand the devastation these relationships can cause, but I also know the key to regaining your power, and I know how to shift the dynamic with these high conflict personalities. In this exclusive webinar, you will discover the 3 essential secrets to go from feeling paralyzed and feeling like a victim to becoming victorious. This isn't just theory. These are proven techniques that I have used to help literally thousands of people go from feeling powerless to feeling victorious and actually breaking free from the grip of narcissistic control.
Hi, my name is Heather, and I have never felt so compelled to give a review as I do now for attorney Rebecca Zung. The strength I had gained and the confidence that I had gained from Rebecca actually allowed me to get a different self-worth and presence in myself. And due to that, I was actually able to pick myself up within, made tremendous difference. And, you know, she has literally changed the situation for me and mostly given me a sense of presence, strength, self-confidence, and well-being that I'm just so grateful for her.
Hi, I'm Dr. Joe Vitale. I know Rebecca Zung. She interviewed me, but I'm also aware of all of her products. What she's doing is saving people who are going through the dark night of the soul. This can be the turning point for you.
Don't let that narcissist have that grip on your life any longer. It's time to rewrite your history and take charge of your future and unlock that power within you. Sign up now for 3 must-have secrets to communicating with narcissists and embark on a transformational journey toward your freedom, toward your empowerment. Break free from the grasp of that narcissist and create the life that you deserve. Join me, attorney Rebecca Zung, narcissist negotiation expert, and let's rewrite your narrative together. Register now at S.L.A.Y.RebeccaZung.com and let's take the first step toward your life of victory. Commanding posture, commanding presence. I'm strong. I stand in my power. Even if your breath is being taken away, you stand there. You show you are not backing down. Remember, this is from the moment that you walk into that room. And even if you are on a Zoom video, by the way, and that camera is turned on, you are sitting in your seat and you are sitting tall and you are showing that you are not backing down. And by the way, same with your tone of voice. Narcissists see if you're scared at all, they feel that. They know that they still got this control over you. You want to show that they don't have any power over you anymore. As far as your personal appearance goes, you're going to want to wear clothes that make you feel confident, that present that you feel confident, that you feel respect for yourself. Wear something that makes you feel like $1,000,000, that makes you feel powerful, that makes you feel like you know what you're doing. Whoever the most powerful version is of yourself, that's the person that is showing up. Your body posture. You're not slouching. You're showing to that narcissist and everybody else in the room too, that you are not somebody to be beaten, that you are a winner, that you're telling everybody in that room how you're carrying yourself. Before you even open your mouth, they know who you are. When you walk into that room, you stand up straight. Body posture can be used to determine a person's level of respect as soon as they walk into a room. So bad posture, like slouching, can be an indicator of a lot of different things, including whether or not somebody's bored or involved in a conversation or whatever. So, make sure that you are sitting there and they know that you know who you are right from the beginning. Personal space, narcissists can be extremely sensitive about their personal space. So be very careful about that when you're dealing with whoever this narcissistic person is. Be hyper aware of that personal space issue. And you just remember that your hand gestures, whatever it is that you're doing, you're very purposeful about it. You're not fidgeting, you're not playing with your hair, you're not finger tapping, you're not hand wringing, you're not twisting your rings. You want to avoid looking nervous. You want to avoid looking anything but totally confident. You want to make sure that you are not slouching. You're not sitting in the chair like, bored or whatever. You sit in the chair in a powerful way. And you can actually use some of the power body language moves that there are out there, like steepling shows that, you are confident. You're making a point over here, or you put your arm over the chair drape shows confidence, openness, that sort of thing. Leaning into a conversation when you're sitting in a chair. Avoid jiggling your feet, avoid jiggling your legs too much, because then that can make you appear to be nervous. So those are just some things that you can do for looking confident and strong from a body language point of view. All right. So that is the first thing for your Jedi power in your mediation. The second thing that you can do is be prepared with your leverage. Make sure it's something that's going to threaten a source of narcissistic supply that is going to be more important for them to keep than the supply that they get from jerking you around. Remember, I talk about diamond level supply versus coal level supply. Make sure that you remember that. That is going to be very, very, very important when looking at how to deal with narcissists. And I have a whole video on how to create leverage with narcissists, which you're definitely going to want to check out. When you're dealing with narcissists, there's a couple of different types of narcissistic supply, and understanding those forms of supply is going to be really, really important. Understanding strategy, understanding leverage, understanding anticipate. My whole S.L.A.Y method is going to be very, very critical. And having two options for them, the option that you want them to take, and then the option that they're not going to want to take, and having that neutral mediator present it to them is going to be really, really critical as well. And if you don't have my Crush My Negotiation Prep worksheet, which is a free 15-page e-booklet, would highly recommend that you get that at winmynegotiation.com. It will help you so much in preparing to crush them in mediation. It's free. It will help you. Make sure you go get it. It's not one of those freebies that doesn't really do anything. It's a freebie that's actually super substantive. So make sure you go get that right now. And just put in the comments right now, I'm going to win. I'm here to win, which is what you're going to do, because what follows after I am is your order that you are placing to the universe, and you're here to win. And that's what's happening, right? So make sure that you are here to win. The next thing is be prepared to walk away. Be prepared to go to trial if you need to. Understand what your choke point is. Know what your risks are. When you go in there, if you're not prepared to go to trial or walk away, then they know they have you. Understand that you're ready to take option A or option B. Be so ready to go, either one is fine with me. Your choice. You want to control that narrative. You want to be in the position of power. So you've got to have done your homework. You want to be the one telling that mediator what's going to go down. And so you got to be prepared with how it's going to go down. You want to have your offer 1 ready to go, offer 2 ready to go. You want to know how this is going to shake out, and you want to know what your choke point is, what your walk away point is before you get there, because the day is going to be stressful. And by the way, you need a lot of support around this. So, this whole idea of dealing with a narcissist when you're negotiating and all of this whole process is stressful. So, I hope that you have the kind of support that you need. Please join my private Facebook group, Narcissist Negotiators with Rebecca Zung, and make sure that you get therapy. And if you don't have access to therapy we have a sponsor on this channel, which is BetterHelp, and you can go to betterhelp.com/Rebecca Zung to get access to that. It is a sponsor on this channel, which means that we receive commissions. You don't pay any extra. We just want you to have access to help and support that you can trust. Next is you need to be prepared to make them sign the agreement. So what I would do is I would have an agreement in Word format or even Google Docs or something like that, ready to go with what it is that you want, but ready to be edited as well. It's going to get changed. It's going to be obviously go through many different formats. But if you have kind of the basics there, the boilerplate language and all the other things sort of spelled out so that all you have to do is change the terms as you go along, then it can be just ready to hit print and get them to sign. because they will change their mind about it before they even get to the parking lot. If you let them leave and you think you've got a deal and all you have to do is type up the terms, they will have changed their minds. You will never pin them down. It's like, how do you solve a problem like Maria? How do you pin a wave and how do you catch a wave and pin it down? You're never going to get them to sign because they get off on jerking you around and playing this game with you, having you all over the place. And many times they find a lawyer who plays the same games. And you know who's paying the price for all of that? You're paying for a lawyer for a 15,000 iterations of an agreement for the next several weeks. And then you never end up getting anything signed anyway. And meanwhile, your emotions are all over the place and you never got anything signed because you thought you had an agreement. You thought you had a deal at the end of mediation, but you didn't. And then you end up having to go to trial anyway. So if you want to make sure you get a deal done, have an agreement ready to go. Her lawyer is wanting mediation, but I don't want to give away anymore. What are your thoughts? So my thoughts are this. When you go to a mediation with a narcissist, yeah, and you can settle a case in mediation with a narcissist, by the way. A lot of people say don't bother mediation or don't bother trying to settle a case with a narcissist. It never works. And every time I see that, I think, no, that's not true. I've had many, many narcissists settle in mediation. But the key is that when you go to mediation with a narcissist, you can't just walk in and think you're going to talk it through and resolve differences, because there's one key element that's missing when you're dealing with a narcissist in mediation, and that is they don't actually really want to settle the case because they get narcissistic supply from jerking you around. So how do you get them to settle a case in mediation? Well, you have to have a super strong strategy, and you have to have created enough leverage that when you get to that mediation, they feel motivated and squeezed and incentivized into settling the case. That's what I teach people how to do with my S.L.A.Y system and my S.L.A.Y program. Strategy, leverage, anticipate what the narcissist is going to do, and focus on your case and you, and creating an offensive position. So, but leverage is really, really key. So the mistake that people make a lot of times when they go into a mediation with a narcissist is that they think that they're dealing with, a reasonable person, or you just think, oh, it's perfunctory, the court's making me do it, so let's just get this over with, and hopefully the mediator will be able to help, and hopefully the lawyers will be able to help, and it just ends up being a really super expensive conversation that doesn't really get you anywhere. So yes, you should mediate, and here's why. Because when you go to mediation, if you get them to sign a settlement agreement in mediation, then the case is done. If you go to court and you go before a judge and the judge hands down a decision, then that decision is appealable. So you could win 100% of everything that you want in court and still not be done, because they can appeal that. And even worse, they can file a motion to stay the orders, meaning whatever you won in that final judgment is just going to be held in limbo, and you're not going to get to enjoy the fruits of that until after the appeal is done. Appeals take a long time and they're very expensive. Now, oftentimes appeals aren't successful. Most of the time, people who appeal don't prevail. I mean, it's like a 15% win rate or something if you're appealing. But even so, you're still dealing with this person. So it is definitely better to try to get them to sign an agreement. But don't go back and forth between your attorneys to try to get them to sign an agreement. You definitely want them to sign in mediation when all these people are around them, the mediator, the other lawyers, because one of the things about narcissists is that they desperately do not want to look bad in front of people that they respect, and especially the judge. So if you get to mediation and you've got all your leverage ready to go, and all of these bits of information that they're realizing is going to come out if they end up in front of a judge, or that they might end up with a bad result or something like that, that's how you squeeze them into settling a case at mediation. So I do recommend that you try to mediate again. And PR, it's kind of a long way of answering your question, but I thought it was a really good one and a great opportunity for me to tell you why I think mediation is a good idea, even if you're dealing with a narcissist, and sometimes especially if you're dealing with a narcissist, because that's where your leverage is going to be the best. Because all narcissists are driven by supply, and a big piece of that supply is how they look in front of people. So looking bad in front of a judge, or maybe having information come out about them that's public that they don't want to come out about them, is a really, really nice form of kind of ethically manipulating the manipulator into signing an agreement. So I call it an ethical manipulation, because you're just taking information that you have and using it against them. And all narcissists are liars and do things that you can definitely use against them. So, you're just trying to get back to what's fair. A lot of people say, I don't want to fight. I don't want to spend a lot of money. If you feel that way, then you've got to create leverage. How to get leverage in your divorce. So first of all, let's define what leverage is. Leverage is the thing that helps you gain advantage in negotiations. It creates incentive in the other side to settle or resolve the negotiations in a way that you want them to. So why do you want it? You want it because you want a fair settlement. You want it because you don't want your divorce to drag out. You want it because you want what's fair. You want what the law provides for you. You want this to go quickly. You don't want to spend thousands in attorney's fees. All really good reasons to have leverage and use it to your advantage. So for some, particularly women, not really sure why this is, or others who think that this is means game playing or being underhanded or manipulative in some way, you might think this is a difficult topic. You might say, I don't want to appear greedy. I don't want to fight. I just want to say what I want and then just resolve it all. I don't want to take too much. I don't want to play games. I've heard all of these kinds of things many times, and many other versions of something like that when it comes to this topic. But here's the thing. It comes down to psychology. People need to feel like they have gotten something, especially in a divorce negotiation. They want to feel that they've gotten something that you wanted, that you didn't get away with something over them. Because your definition of fair may not be their definition of fair. It usually isn't. So, and you want to know another dirty little divorce secret? Being the nice one in the divorce rarely gets you what you want. That's the bottom line. So how do you get leverage? Number one, first you have to know the value of what you have that the other side might want. Number two, do your research. Figure out the value if you need to. Figure out what the other side may argue. Be prepared to meet that argument with sound reasoning based in fact and research. Number three, figure out what's incentivizing the other side. Is it money? Is it the kids? Is it pride? Is it not being embarrassed? Is it humiliation? Is it, what is it that's incentivizing the other side? Because that's the key to your leverage. Don't give away your leverage too early in the game. Again, a bigger problem that I see with women, not always, sometimes men make this mistake too, but make sure you save your leverage for when you're going to need it, which is further down in the negotiation process, after you've done your research, after you've figured out what it is that incentivizes the other side, and you're prepared.
So you know the old expression, if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail? Well, that is magnified by like a million when you're dealing with a narcissist in divorce. I've seen it many, many times. I've represented them thousands of times. I've been on the other side of them. I've seen them as opposing counsel. And I've actually had to deal with a couple of pesky, awful, horrible narcissists in my own life. And so I know exactly how the mind of a narcissist works and what the psyche of a narcissist is like in the middle of a divorce. So here are a couple of the tricks that they play in divorce. Twisting everything you do or say. So every time you send them a text or an email, or you just speak to them in person, or you communicate with them in any way, or even if they hear about something that you've said, they're going to twist it. They're going to take the parts that they like. They're going to cut off other parts. They're certainly not above cutting and pasting parts of texts or emails to make it look like you said something or didn't say something. They'll do whatever they can to make you look bad and them look good. Because remember, with narcissists, they have no sense of inner value. All of their value comes from the external. They need an endless amount of what we call narcissistic supply, which is where they are boosting up their ego. And supply can come in the form of good things, such as a big house, or what I call positive things, a great job, being friends with the right people, things like that. Or it can come in the form of what I call negative things, which is causing you to feel devalued, debased, degraded, making you squirm, manipulating you. They get supply from that as well. And so that's what you see happening in a divorce. Because remember, for a narcissist, you have no value. Your value when you're in a relationship with them is just what you can do for them and what kind of value you can give to their endless need for supply. So once you've shown yourself to not want to be in a relationship with them anymore, even if they are actually in the process of doing the discard, then you have no value left for them anymore. So now you're the enemy, because when you're dealing with a narcissist, you can't just nicely walk your own direction and shake hands and just say, well, let's just let the law dictate what's fair, and we'll just sign something and be on our way and wish each other well. It doesn't work that way with narcissists. With narcissists, you're either for them or you're against them. So that's why they're going to twist everything that you do or say. The next thing that narcissists do in divorce is obstruction. So it's crazy, because there'll be laws in every state and everywhere that you have to provide certain types of financial documents to each other, and it's mandatory, it's required, and they won't provide what's mandatory. They won't provide what's required, or they might only pick and choose what they want to provide. So, if they're supposed to provide 12 months of credit card statements, you'll just see them provide 10 months worth, but suddenly July is missing or September is missing, and then you have to try to go back and try to get it. And all of this is just very frustrating. And a lot of times my clients will end up saying to me, how is he getting away with this? How is she getting away with this? Well, something that I remind people all the time is that there are no divorce fairies that just pop out in the middle of people's living rooms and go, hey, you're not allowed to do that. Or, hey, you're supposed to provide that document. How come you're not doing it? So they're going to get away with it until they can't get away with it anymore. And what happens is they will no longer get away with it when somebody brings it in front of the judge. Because remember, the only person who has any power to order somebody to do something is a judge. No one else, or the police, if you call the police because they've done something criminal. But when you're talking about civil actions, you can just push everything through the judge. So you end up filing a lot of motions, and motions to compel and motions to enforce and things like that, so that they produce the documents that they're supposed to produce. So that's number two trick that they play is obstruction. Another thing that you'll see narcissists do is ignoring court orders. And that's kind of what I was just talking about with ignoring laws, but they also ignore court orders. And it's just so mind-boggling sometimes because, you know, what I've seen people do sometimes is early on, they'll come up with a parenting plan, or maybe you come up with an agreement that's signed that becomes a court order that says you're not supposed to introduce new significant others to the children. And, you know, lo and behold, there they are introducing their new girlfriends or new boyfriends to the children. And that's a violation of now a court order. And so you have to file a motion to get it enforced, or ask the court to issue a show cause order as to why they shouldn't be held in contempt for violating that court order. But the thing with narcissists is narcissists are street fighters. They will fight dirty, and they'll do as much as they possibly can that they think that they can get away with. There's really no bar that's too low, or no thing that's too far, as long as they're pretty sure that they can get away with it. Or even if they're so sometimes arrogant about it, or so distorted in their thinking that they think that they'll get away with things, even if they don't necessarily end up getting away with things. Another thing you see narcissists do is constantly move the goalposts when you're talking about agreements. And what I mean by this is, and listen to me when I tell you this, do not send letters back and forth between your lawyers trying to settle the case. You'll never settle the case with a narcissist that way. And it ends up just being a waste of your time and money. Because what happens is they'll send over a proposal, and even if you agree to 100% of everything they send over, by the time you send over your agreement, they've already changed what the deal is. They'll say, okay, well, yeah, you still have to live up to everything that you just agreed that you're going to give the other person, but now they want more, and they're going to give you less of whatever it was that they were supposed to do. And it just constantly changes, because they get supply out of making you squirm. So while you, as the reasonable person, think that you're working toward a goal of resolving the case, silly, their goal is to manipulate you and make you squirm as much as possible. So you actually don't even have the same goals there. So one of the things you will see them do is constantly move that goalpost, constantly change back and forth. And another thing I will tell you is, do not use a collaborative process. Don't use a collaborative attorney. It's a waste of time when it comes to dealing with narcissists and divorce. And also, don't mediate too early. You're going to need leverage before you go to mediation. And another thing that narcissists do as far as tricks in divorce is they start triangulating, smear campaigns, getting all their flying monkeys lined up, the people that they're turning against you, so that you know, you feel like the world is against you and everybody's believing their lies. So that's another thing that they do. And one other thing that they do is intimidation tactics, scare tactics, try to make you think that you're going to lose your kids, or you're going to have no money, or be out on the street, or that they're going to take everything from you. They're going to use the court system as their sword. They'll use the children as pawns, things like that. I mean, as I said, you know, there's really no bar that's too low. They'll do whatever they can to scare the crap out of you. And if you're dealing with a narcissist in divorce right now and you've already seen them do these things, give me a totally in the comments right now. Okay, so here's what to do to be prepared. Document, document, document. I cannot say it enough. In your documentation, you will end up finding your leverage, I promise. Leverage isn't necessarily always this smoking gun. It is usually made up of many different things, such as lots and lots of text messages, or figuring out when they didn't show up for the kids and how often and what are the percentages, and, you know, building a strategy around what kinds of leverage you have. So that's all actually part of my S.L.A.Y program, for those of you who are familiar with my program, which is S.L.A.Y Your Negotiation with a Narcissist. And S.L.A.Y actually stands for having a super strong strategy, having invincible leverage, anticipate what the narcissist is going to do and be 2 steps ahead of them, and focusing on you and your case. And so you've got to have this S.L.A.Y method together. But the first part of getting that method together is definitely documenting every single thing. You can just have the notes part of your phone open, just assuming that you've changed your passwords and all of that. And just keeping track of absolutely everything. The next thing you can do, I just alluded to, is change your passwords on everything, including all your cloud devices. Anywhere you have a login, make sure you change those passwords. The next thing that you can do to be prepared if you haven't filed for divorce yet is have a stash of cash available, especially if you are the non-moneyed spouse. If it's possible for you to have at least 3 months worth of cash until you can get to a temporary relief hearing. And nowadays, right, the courts are a little bit crazy and they're super backed up. So, who knows when you'll even be able to get a hearing. So you want to have at least a few months worth of living expenses, both to live on and also to be able to hire a lawyer. So the next thing you're going to want to do is figure out a plan. Where are you going to be living? Are you going to stay in the house? Is the other person going to stay in the house? Or are you going to stay there together? If you're going to move out, where are you going to go? How are your expenses going to be paid? If you decide to move out, make sure that you're thinking about a parenting plan if you have children. You want to think about all these things ahead of time. One of my clients who actually left a narcissistic husband too early said that she ended up having to go back. And then he punished her and made it worse. And it was so much worse for the next couple of years. So the next time she left him, she got all her ducks in a row and she knew exactly how she was going to execute it down to the letter. She actually even packed the suitcase and walked out the door while he was sleeping in the middle of the night. And she knew exactly what hotel she was going to. She had directed us exactly what time and where to serve him. She knew she was going to be away for at least 2 weeks after he was served. Then she went and stayed with her mother. She had it all planned out ahead of time. And by the way, she had hired me ahead of time. So that's something else that you should be thinking about, is hiring a lawyer and getting the right lawyer, somebody who understands narcissism, who's going to be on your side, you're going to feel like you have a rapport with, and who's going to go on the offensive for you, because the nicey nice method when you're dealing with a narcissist doesn't fly. They just see it as weakness and use it as an opportunity to make things worse for you.
But, during the worst, most traumatic time of your life, you have to make the most critical decisions of your life. Mm-hmm. And so you're under siege, and it's bad enough when you're divorcing normally, but then when you add on the layer of divorcing a narcissist, now you're trying to make decisions about your money, your home, your children, all the things that mean the most to you, your business, potentially. While you're under siege and while you're trying to heal yourself. I mean, people who've been in narcissistic relationships for long periods of time are like PTSD. I mean, they're seriously, traumatized, and they're trying to make decisions. So, for example, this woman I spoke to this morning, she wants to change her custody arrangement. She said that, when she entered into the custody agreement at the time, she was so terrorized by him. She just wanted to get out of it. She just wanted to be done. And so she agreed to stuff that she didn't want, now she regrets, So what I'd like to hear from Tina is, how did you keep your mindset strong? How were you able to keep going and not give up and keep yourself healthy?
It was a process. The first few years, had I not been journaling and blogging about it, if I were to look back, I remember very little of it. I feel like I was operating in a state of trauma and shock and emotions. And for me, it was a few years into it before I started going to sit in the courtroom. And it was a way for me to learn about the process and how attorneys handle things and how different case law. And I became a fixture in the courtroom on days that it had nothing to do with me, and just there as an observer, because it allowed first for me to desensitize myself, because it just became part of my every, so then walking into the courtroom when it was my own case, I was much stronger. And I was educated on what was going on and the motions that I was filing. And I didn't get it right all the time, but it helped tremendously. And what I learned is that so much of it is about strategy, and judges and attorneys, anybody in those courtrooms, they don't want to see your emotions. That was one of the things I learned quickly is I would walk to the bathroom in the courthouse and have a panic attack or vomit or break down crying. But when I walked through those doors, I had to, put my shoulders back and my head up and, almost role play was kind of the mentality I had to have. But, and just forming alliances when I would be in the courtroom and I would see another parent who I could, identify as the healthy parent in the situation, I'd follow them out into the hallway and say, here's my card. Sounds crazy. I'd love to go to coffee with you because we have a lot in common. And that started building my local team. So, those were some of the things that I did in the beginning. And from day one, I remember people telling me, this is a 50-50 state. California, I think every state is 50-50 at this point. And that's, truly what you just have to accept that. And I refused. I couldn't even grasp how somebody could, some people, it's truly, their exes are so good at impression management that may be in the cards for them. And then you're forced to accept radical acceptance, managing your expectations, that whole thing. But for me, I couldn't accept that was what was best for my kids. And that was the mentality I kept moving me forward and really celebrating the little victories, which I consider to be anytime my kids are a little bit safer. And that just kept the momentum going until I think it was about year 6 that we were assigned a custody evaluator, and he really understood what I was up against. And his orders or his recommendation to the court were unlike anything I've ever heard of before. And it was so strict. And the judge ended up saying, I'm not going to adopt all of these because I don't want to micromanage this guy. But the ultimate ruling on year 6 was permanent supervised visits. So he could never again be alone. And the judge said, I intend for these to be final custody orders, which was huge. But as we know, a narcissist can't handle that. Their ego doesn't want someone supervising them. That's a huge threat. And so he jumped ship and we didn't hear from him for a year and a half. But that was a year and a half of peace. And I was fantastic. So it's those baby steps. It's, what, today my kids are a little bit safer, and that kept me going. And when I did, there were so many times where I threw myself a huge pity party when I got slammed in court, and I just always set an end time. I can allow myself a day or two to be mad or angry because it's warranted. But then, Friday, I'm going to dust myself off and I'm going to try again because my kids need me. There's no one else that's going to fight for them.
Absolutely. I just want to inject a little bit of the legal side of some of the things that you just said. And one is that, there is a kind of unspoken presumption, I'll call it, for this 50-50 thing right now in most of the states. I think there are a couple of holdouts. I think New York doesn't quite have that presumption yet, but it's not necessarily a legal presumption, meaning a legal presumption would mean that when the court sits down, when the judge sits down, then they're going to presume that this is what it's going to be. And then the other person who doesn't want that has the burden of proving why it shouldn't be that. So that would be a legal presumption. So it's not necessarily a legal presumption in a lot of the states, but it's kind of like an unspoken presumption. And so what I want people to remember is that what the real presumption is and should always be is best interest of the child. And I just had a situation with this with the judge back in January. I was at a hearing, and the judge, the baby at the time was maybe 5 months old or something like that. And the judge was like, well, you know, you guys are coming to trial in May. So, you know, don't bother coming in here if, you know that it's going to be 50-50 and whatever. And I'm like, really, Your Honor, before you even hear one word about what's in the best interest of this child, you know that there's 18 factors in the statute that you're supposed to consider. So if you're making a decision right here and now, then that's grounds for your recusal. And so, you know, right away, he's like, oh, of course, we have to, you know, consider the factors. And, you know, and of course, he backpedaled right away. But, you know, I want people to understand that, yes, it's that, but don't just give up on that. Don't just say that's what it is and be resigned to that. Remind the court, remind the judge, remind everybody you can that the standard is best interest of the child. And there is, I'm sure, a statute in every single state that has, you know, the factors that have to be considered by the court. So don't just like resign yourself to that's what it's going to be. So
Rebecca, I have a comment on that though, because despite that, the best interest of the child, you know, anyone who's, you know, doing advocacy work, mental health work, you've been in the divorce space, in almost all of these cases, I'm not willing to hazard a guess that 75 to 90% of these cases, they're not taking into account the best interest of the child. And these statutes and these 18 points and all this stuff can exist. And in that particular case, it might have even been easier because it was a 5-month-old baby. But when I am seeing over and over and over again is cases where there is no way on planet Earth that the best interest of this child is being accounted for. So even if that's written into the law, and I suppose, yes, it becomes one more grounds of which an attorney could attempt to push the point, I still feel like most judges are going to reject that out of hand because they still feel like the argument of a parent that's antagonistic and toxic and undermining and invalidating and alienating and all the things that they are, is that they're going to say there's no evidence of that. You know, I mean, the evidence that you'd have to show that it's not in the best interest of the child is often quite physical. Like you lived 20,000 miles from the kid's school, or you travel 3 weeks a month. They'll run with that. But these subtle psychological factors, which I don't even think are subtle, I am not seeing a judge in America account for this stuff.
yeah, I mean, that's the difficulty, right? Because it's like, it is so subtle and the judges are always looking for the easy way out.
Yes.
I mean, and so it is difficult. So what you have to do is you have to be able to present a case in such a way that they can't look away. And you can't go in and say the person's a narcissist or, you know, accuse them of any kind of something like that that's not readily supportable, you know, because that's when you're going to lose your own credibility, even if the person is the most flaming narcissist on the planet. So you have to go in with, you know, reams of supporting documentation as to what's in the best interest of the child. I mean, Tina's nodding her head because, you know, you figured it out. And I'm really amazed and give you such props that you were able to go in there and think of the idea of, I'm going to go watch other court proceedings and figure it out. You know, so talk more about like how you were able to do that, because, you know, there's so many people out there who can't afford a good lawyer, who can't afford, you know, a therapist. They can't afford anything. They're like, you know, you were talking about going to the food pantry or whatever. I mean, if it's like eating versus an attorney, you're going to pick eating. So talk more about that.
So, you know, I know one of the things I talk to parents all the time who will tell me, you know, I don't have time to go sit in the courtroom. You know, I tell them, you don't have time not to. I was working full time. You know, one of the things I didn't mention, when I left my marriage, you know, just so people don't, you know, go, well, you know, she has all these resources or whatnot. I left with $178 to my name, not a penny in retirement, not a penny in, you know, any type of account. literally under $200. And I was working full time. I had 2 little girls in preschool. The cost of preschool is insane when you've got 2 little ones. But I made that a priority. And, you know, however you have to do it, for me, that was the number one, you know, that was the best thing I could have ever done. It gave me so much insight into things attorneys used. And then I would go, you know what? And a lot of people, so, you know, how did you win based on him being a narcissist? I've never used that word. I've written 4 books on the topic, but I've never used that word narcissist to anybody. You know, I focused on his patterns of behavior that were affecting my kids.
Exactly.
And, you know, and pain, you know, seeing, and one thing I don't think people understand, if I were in courtroom A, I would present my case, my exact case, one way. But if I were in courtroom B, just based on what I know about that judge, I would present my case completely different, because they're human. They bring in their own biases and
they do.
personal, you know, there's a judge down in Southern California who lost a child to a drug overdose. So she takes addiction issues very seriously. My ex-husband was an alcoholic. So you better believe I would hit heavy on the alcoholism in her courtroom. And I think people don't give that, you know, there's no rule book for any of this. And,
It's
you
so
know,
smart, so
So
smart.
smart. So smart.
thank you. So, you know, so much of it was learning, you know, so many learning lessons. And when I was in the hallways of the courtroom on break, I would make conversations with every attorney that would talk to me, and, you know, and you share my story. I couldn't afford their consults, but if they're bored sitting in the hallway, I would use that as an opportunity to introduce myself, let them know. And so many were so helpful to me through this process, you know, just really forming those connections, knowing who every single player is in your system. Every evaluator, you need a notebook of just family court professionals. Anytime you hear something about one of them, or you witness an evaluator testifying in court, or, you know, a minors counsel, write down every detail about them so you can make an informed decision. You know, if you are going to be assigned an evaluator. I think one of the things I was so naive about in the beginning, I was desperate for someone to listen to me. And so I would show up in court and I would beg, you know, appoint minors counsel, appoint an evaluator. Somebody's got to see what's happening. And if I could go back and do it all over again, I would have said, you know, here are my 3 selections for an evaluator. I don't care which anybody can choose from this list.
That's what
but
I
I
do.
would, yeah, exactly. And then it gives the other side the power and control that they need to make that decision. But like in my case, the minors counsel who was appointed, because I didn't know anything about him, he turned out to be a bigger narcissist than than my ex-husband in a lot of ways. And so it was a complete waste of time and energy and resources. And so really entrenching yourself in your system and learning the ropes and the people, you have to do it.
That's such great advice. Really, really great advice. You know, as you were talking, I was wondering if one of the other things that you did, because if you did, this would be a great idea. You know, if you know that there are particularly good lawyers or lawyers who understand, you know, what you're dealing with, you know, pleadings are actually public information. So did you go to the clerk and read motions and look at stuff that other lawyers had filed?
So if I saw a case that closely resembled my case, I would take down their names and go find them, because in our court, we're pretty archaic. We have like you have to get these little slides and you look at all of the microfiche. And so I would go pull people's cases and just sit there and go through their whole case from start to finish.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah. That's exactly what I was wondering that you did. Yeah. So that's so smart. Really, really smart. But of course, very time consuming. Right.
Yeah.
So Dr. Ramani, what would be, you know, ways that people can kind of self-care and cope during this process?
You know, Tina, what is so striking about what you just said, and just so everyone knows, Tina is actually literally one of my favorite people on the planet, and she knows that too. So I really, I know the depth of her story. Is that what's striking to anyone hearing this is that, and what I see in many of the clients I work with is that they get exhausted. They go to a place of full-on helplessness, hopelessness, and powerlessness, which are often some of the last stops on the train before full-blown major depression and anxiety disorders and all of that, like really major psychological and psychiatric, fallout from this. And as a result, the persistence you showed, Tina, is remarkable. Because and what I love about what you did, Tina, was you weren't trying to control things you can control, namely judges who didn't get it, custody evaluators who didn't get it, court systems who didn't get it. You weren't trying to control those mechanisms. You were trying to learn about them. And of all the guidance I've ever heard, because you feel so powerless, give yourself the time to learn. Look up the cases, learn what happened in those cases, learn about the judges. I mean, I think that anytime we can give a person a sense of control, that's something they can actually do, is really, really important. But I do have to say, Tina, there's a unique resilience that you're manifesting, because I do think for people, the day in and day out, the demoralization, and no matter how much evidence they present to the court, it feels like no matter what, it's not working out their way, to the point where I've seen children who are, being forced to co-reside, and have custody with the more narcissistic parent, to the incredible detriment of the child's mental health. And the mother can't even make the argument in this case that really it is exposure to this toxic parent. I mean, he has completely worked that whole system beautifully. So to your question though, Rebecca, number one, I would say it's absolutely critical you reach out not only for therapy with somebody who gets narcissistic abuse. And I'm really put that point on it, because many, many times I actually don't think that clients in this space should be entirely targeted as though they have post-traumatic stress disorder. I think PTSD is a very different kind of phenomenology. And while addressing early traumas and all of that may be an issue, I think that there's something rather unique about the narcissistic abuse space, because it moves pretty quickly when a person gets lots of education. Because I am shocked in 4 to 6 sessions when a client really is helped to understand what happened, how their own early, their family of origin issues connect, and they see it, they're like, that's it. Like, I'm good. Thank you. I'm not a crazy person. Thank you. That's not how treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder works.
That is so good.
Yeah, it's very, very different. And now, are there many, many people out there who experience issues in their experience of a narcissistic divorce? Physical violence, sexual violence, severe financial deprivation, coercive control, all things that are associated with PTSD? Absolutely. And I do think that is a subset of cases, but I think an even larger subset of cases are people who really are experiencing a more pure version of being absolutely confused by the manipulation. And once they simply get psychoeducation, which is how I got into putting out these YouTube videos, because not everyone could come sit in my office. There's just not even enough hours in the day for me to do that. I wrote books for this reason, thinking if people could get this, they may stop blaming themselves. So it becomes therapy with someone who gets it. Number two is also accessing the advocacy community. That is something Tina opened me up to, is that there are people like Tina out there who get it and put resources out in a way from a lived experience perspective. Her Facebook page is a robust resource that I refer all of my clients going through this to, and to her website. So those services exist, basically a support group mechanism of people who get it. But then beyond that, I really, really do tell people is that you are not defined by this experience. I actually think that survivors of narcissistic abuse who really then take this as a jumping off point, to the degree we're talking about it being a trauma, what I really do see is tremendous post-traumatic growth. People saying, I can see these people coming from a mile away. I am actually going to be a lot more careful in my relationships. I am getting rid of the people in my life who are not good for me. They actually do a whole clean out, like a toxic dump. They knock everyone out, because they're like, I'm not doing this anymore. And they realize how many people in their midst were the enablers of the narcissistic abuse. And through a good support network, therapy, advocacy, support groups, you get people who say, it's okay. It's okay to remove people from your life, because they'll get a lot of guilt. Like, how dare you not speak to this one? How dare you do you? And so it's very much it's a process of healing, which I've got to tell you, I have seen many, many people soar. They go back to school, they take on the careers they thought they wouldn't, they travel, they feel like better parents. I mean, they really do come out of it. But all of that said, it really is a daily practice. Things like mindfulness, meditation, getting also treatment for other disorders that may have come up or gotten exacerbated, anxiety disorders, depression, substance use disorders that can sometimes flare up in the face of all of this. It's about taking care of you. And also keep in mind, Rebecca and Tina, you know this very well, is that people who've been through a narcissistic divorce or a long period of narcissistic abuse in their lives, self-care for themselves is the first thing they threw out. They stop taking care of themselves. They'll often start eating more poorly, gaining weight, making themselves at risk for things like diabetes. They don't get their regular healthcare appointments. They don't take care of themselves because in some ways, staying in a narcissistically abusive relationship is so sort of self-harming that you're on like, why would I take care of myself? You know, it's like you're a car, you just drive into the ground at that point. And that awakening of getting out of that relationship is often an awakening that you're this beautiful soul, this beautiful creature that deserves to be taken care of. So it's lots of enlightenment, lots of awakening, lots of education, lots of support, lots of therapy. And again, slowly but surely going into a wiser future.
Yeah, that's such great stuff. Really, really good advice. And you know, I just want to add in as far as like the legal perspective on this. Something that people can do is, you know, maybe if you can't afford to have a lawyer for the entire process, but maybe have a consulting lawyer, you know, maybe somebody that you'd be willing to, you know, if you have a little bit of money, you could go in and just make sure that, you know, kind of like what Tina did when she was sort of having these hallway conversations. But, you know, if you wanted to have somebody who was, you know, taking a look at an agreement and maybe just reviewing an agreement for you and just spending an hour of their time doing that, you know, something, you know, where you get a little bit of that legal protection if you can afford to have even that. You know, obviously I have a program for that as well for people. And, you know, but if there's a way that you can access some help, that's I think really, really helpful for people to have access to that. Because remember, narcissists get supply from making your life miserable. And the one thing that I really want people to understand is that there is a hierarchy of supply for narcissists. There's like this diamond level supply, which they will hold on to and protect at any cost, which is how they look, their reputation, their place in the community, you know, especially in front of people that they respect, which they certainly respect judges and attorneys and other people involved in the process. They want the parenting plan coordinator to, you know, think that they're wonderful, or the guardian ad litem, or the custody evaluator, whoever's involved. And so they'll protect their reputation and how they look at any cost. And that's really like the level of supply for them. And then there's what I call the coal level of supply. And the coal level of supply is like the supply that gives them energy, it burns. And they love it, of course. They want to keep all areas of supply that they can, all lines of it. But the supply that they get from jerking you around, making you miserable, dragging out the case, making you squirm, making you feel intimidated, all those kinds of things is what I call coal level supply. So the key in creating leverage in any negotiation is going to be threatening that diamond level supply in a way where they really feel like this is going to happen, but not actually doing it. That's like the key. If you can manage it, is be ready to go through with it, but not actually have to, because they'll let go of the coal level supply, which is the making you miserable part, in order to grasp on and hold on to that diamond level of supply. And that's what I teach you how to do. You've got to create that strategy. You've got to create that leverage. Otherwise, you will be led around by the nose, because making you miserable is what they actually want out of the negotiation. They don't want anything else. They don't want, they just want that supply. They get supply from making you miserable. So let's see, I have some questions now, and I just answered the question about the lawyer. I really want you guys to make sure that you check that out. As far as, so come join me in my free webinar next week. There'll be a sign up link for it. It'll be pinned to the first column. Come join me there. I'll talk all more about how to make your lawyer your ally. I'm going to talk all about that next week in the webinar. So make sure you join me for that. And I'll also be doing another Ask the Attorney Anything session there as well. As far as getting a narcissistic parent to sign rights over, I did in Ask the Attorney Anything on all sorts of custody stuff. I answered everything in that. I definitely recommend you go and check that out, because I just did that like maybe 2 weeks ago. So I don't want to be redundant here for people who want me to answer other questions, but everything custody, go check out on my Ask the Attorney Anything from like 2 weeks ago. You'll find it there. Let's see. Best strategy for unraveling a narcissist's vile behavior in court. So Marissa, that is what I was just talking about with that diamond level. So like it all comes down to understanding that the only thing that drives a narcissist, there's only one thing. It's like the rats in the maze with the cheese, and that is narcissistic supply. But understand that there's better cheese than others, right? And so there's a certain kind of cheese that they're going to protect more than anything. And that's what you have to threaten. And it is only then that they will finally let go of what they're doing to you. That is the only way that you will get this to happen. All right. So I know when people are telling me that they've had cases going on for 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and they've spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, which I did a survey in my Facebook group and found out that a huge percentage of you, I think it was over 86%, had cases that lasted more than 18 months. It was something like 40% had more than 18 months, and then another 46% was more than 3 years. So, you know, you've got to get a hold of it. And if you don't figure out a way to get a hold of it, you're going to be off, you know, on this wild horse that's going nowhere, and you're not going to be able to control the situation. So that's the way you'll do it. So why does a narcissist run the court system? They don't necessarily run the court system. It's just that presenting your case and presenting your evidence and presenting your leverage all has to be done in a very methodical way, or the court system will not see it. You have to present it in a way where you're leading them step by step. You're leading the judge step by step to exactly the conclusion that you want to have them come to. And the only way to do that is through that magic bullet leverage. And that's exactly what I teach you how to do in my S.L.A.Y program. So Casey says, thank you for all the videos you create on narcs. It's helped me a lot. I finally realized my wife has PTSD. I'm so sorry, but I'm so glad that you are here. And now that more of you are here, I want to thank you all again. I just reached 100,000 subscribers yesterday in a period of 10 months. That means that so many of you are so hungry for real information, real knowledge and power, and fighting back and standing up to and creating a situation where you are finally in control with these narcissists. There's only one way to negotiate with narcissists, and that is the S.L.A.Y methodology. That's it. It's the only thing that works. I know, I've seen it. I've used it in my own practice as a lawyer with my clients, and I've also used it in my own life. I've had to deal with a couple of narcissists in my own life, and thank God I've been able to go no contact and have boundaries. But you know, while you're still in the thick of it with them, while you're still having to negotiate with them because you need something from them, you know, you need to get out of this business relationship, or you need to get out of the marriage, and there's stuff that needs to be done. then making sure that you set yourself up in a place where you are going to be protected is going to be so critical. Otherwise, you're going to be farther and farther and farther into the ditch, and it's harder and harder and harder to climb your way out of it. So getting a hold of it right as soon as you can is absolutely critical. So let me see if I have any more questions that I can answer. Let's see. Somebody's saying, have you noticed, this is Pete, have you noticed that they're on edge, knowing one word will set them off? So I always say that the not so secret is that the narcissist is actually the weaker one, that you are actually the stronger one. They don't want you to know that. I often say it's like the Wizard of Oz, like they have that whole like powerful thing going on, and the wizard had created Oz, and it was so beautiful, and you go there, big huge head, and it's the great and powerful Oz, and then you look behind the curtain and it's this old little man, and that's kind of what's going on with the narcissist. They don't want you to see the little thing behind the curtain, which is that you are actually the stronger one. And pulling away that curtain and showing your power is exactly what we do here and what I teach you on this channel. So
now let's talk about leverage. What is it? And how do you get it? And when do you use it? And when you're dealing with a narcissist, you're going to need it, believe me, because a narcissist does have a plan, believe it or not, and that plan is to take you down. It's to smear you. It's to use everything they possibly can against you. Everything you do and say will be used against you, just like as if you were being arrested, but so much worse. So if you don't have leverage as part of your overall strategy, you will be sunk. You're going to be like put to sea in shark-infested waters with no oars to help you and nothing to save you. You will go down. You're going to constantly feel like you're on the defensive rather than finally feeling like you can go on the offensive for a change. So if you're looking at negotiating with a narcissist, whether it's in a divorce situation or a business partner setting or anything like that, leverage is the one thing that you are absolutely going to need to have in order to gain an advantage over them. And the truth of the matter is that even for people who say, I don't want to fight, and as a divorce attorney, I've been a divorce attorney for over 20 years, I can tell you that every single person who comes through the doors of my office says, I don't want to fight. Nobody wants to fight because nobody wants to spend thousands of dollars with the divorce attorney. Fighting means spending money if you have an attorney engaged, even if you're in a business partner setting and you're dealing with an attorney, fighting means spending money because attorneys bill on time for the most part. So every single person says, I don't want to fight. But the truth of the matter is, if you don't want to fight, and you're dealing with a narcissist on the other side, then you have to have leverage just to get back to the middle, just to get back to what's fair. The problem is that if you are a reasonable person, then you're just thinking in reasonable terms. Well, let's just come up with an agreement. Let's just think of how we can settle this in a way that's fair for everybody. I don't want to take this person for all they're worth. I just want what is fair or equitable. I just want to be done with this thing. I just want to move on with my life. That's the way you, reasonable person, are thinking. That is not the way narcissists think, because to them, the fight, the making you squirm, the jerking you around is actually part of how they get narcissistic supply. They enjoy that. So you are not on the same page from the beginning. Neither of you are thinking in the same terms. One of you is thinking, let's just get this done. The other one is thinking, let's jerk this person around. So you can't come to this realization of, oh, let's just resolve this thing, amicably. It's not going to happen if you're truly dealing with a narcissist. Remember that narcissists have no inner sense of value. All of their value comes from the external. So they need an endless amount of supply in order for them to feel valuable. And supply, while it can come in the form of money and compliments and respect and adulation, it also, for them, comes in the form of making you squirm, jerking you around, getting their way, beating you, winning, but not winning in the same way that you think of as winning. Winning to them is jerking you around. That's a win. It's not even that they necessarily want the end result the same way that you may. So if you want to get anywhere with a narcissist, even though you don't want to fight, I know it sounds counterintuitive, but in order to get where you want to go, you are going to have to create leverage. And it has to be part of an overall strategy. And I talk so much more in depth on this in my S.L.A.Y program. And S.L.A.Y stands for having strategy. You have to have a super strong strategy. And then leverage, which is what I'm talking about here. And then anticipating what the narcissist is going to do and being 2 steps ahead of them, and then focusing on you and your case. So you do have to have an overall strategy. What's your long game? What's your vision? What's your end result? Where do you want to go? Sometimes when you've been so traumatized by a narcissist for so long, it can almost seem foreign to you to think in terms of, where am I going with this? I can actually maybe be on the offensive. Maybe I could actually win this thing, or get where I want to go. What do I want? It's really hard sometimes to think in those terms because you've been beaten down for so long and you've been told that you're selfish, or you've been told that there's something wrong with you, or you've been told that you don't deserve to have anything. And so you start to believe that stuff. But I'm here to tell you that that's not true. You deserve to have a fair result. You deserve to have whatever it is that you want you're entitled to under the law. And sometimes you can even get people to settle for more than what you're entitled to under the law, depending on if you have enough leverage or not. But leverage is that thing that's going to motivate and inspire and incentivize the narcissist to want to come to the table with you. And it could be in the form of all different kinds of things. I mean, it could be people that you get to testify against them. It could be information that they don't want out there. It could be a chart of their web of lies. It could be all kinds of different things. The thing is that leverage isn't only one thing. You've got to have a lot of it, and it's got to be in multiple different forms, because you're basically building an invisible fence around the narcissist while they're not looking, so that by the time they look up, when you're sitting in mediation or whatever, they realize that they are surrounded by all sides, and there's no way they're getting out unless they sign an agreement with you. And that's what you're doing with leverage. If you want to know more about negotiating with a narcissist, check out my video on negotiating with a narcissist. I also have a video on divorce mediation with a narcissist, and you're going to want to check that one out as well. And if you're ready to do this, I want to see a let's do this in the comments. When you're looking at different types of leverage, what you want to be looking at is anything that's going to interrupt their supply. That's going to be the key, because narcissists just want one thing. They just want that one prize. There's one thing that motivates them. As human beings who are not narcissistic, there's lots of different things that motivate us and incentivize us to do the things that we do. With narcissists, it's just the one thing. It's supply. And it can be in the form of good things like money and prestige and compliments and adulation and respect. And it can be in the form of bad things too, such as devaluing, degrading, and, you know, making you feel like a piece of crap, jerking you around, controlling the process. And in a court setting, it looks like ignoring court orders, refusing to give discovery, which we call obstruction. It could be in the form of smear campaigns, lying about things that you do, using the court system as their sword, using your children as pawns, things like that. So that's their plan. And if you don't have a plan, then they will take you down. So leverage is that thing that you're pushing against them. It's you're leveraging your position in a way against them, and it's going to be in the form of their supply. And the one thing that I really want you to remember is this. That is that they get supply from jerking you around. So how you are going to get your case settled is by threatening a source of supply to them that's actually more important for them to keep than the leverage or the supply that they get from jerking you around. In other words, is it more important for them to not be exposed that they have a sexually transmitted disease? Is it more important for them to look good in the community or in front of the judge or to hold on to their money or something like that? Is that in the long run going to be more important to them than the supply and the satisfaction that they get from jerking you around? Or maybe it's that they have a new set of supply that's better for them and they want to move on and they just want you to sign. That's a good piece of leverage that you would have too. So figuring out what source of supply you could potentially threaten to take away from them will really very much help your situation. So inside of my program, I give like 30 different examples of leverage. There's no one thing that's leverage for every single narcissist, other than the fact that it's definitely going to be tied into their supply source. So let's talk about that magic bullet. When you are dealing with a narcissist in a negotiation setting, it feels impossible, doesn't it? Like, doesn't it feel like, oh my God, why do they always win? Why do they always get away with things? So one thing I do want to say about getting away with things is, you know, when you say that, number one, it kind of like assumes, by the way, that there's sort of like this magic person or power that should be overseeing everything. And the only person that has any power over somebody is a judge. That's the only person who has the power to say, you are ordered to do this. And if you don't do this, something bad is going to happen to you. Lawyers don't have that power. Police don't really have that power. Police can arrest people, but even once they're arrested, they end up having to end up in court, and then a judge will decide what happens to them. So regardless of whatever the situation is, the only people who have power to order people to do things are judges. That's it, no one else. And so the power that lawyers have is in getting people in front of judges and persuading judges that the law says that this is what should happen to this person and asking the judge to render that order. And then judges take all the information together. They listen to the facts. They you know, the evidence. They gather all the stuff. They take it under consideration once it's submitted to them, and they render an order. And then whatever the order says, the order says. And at that point, people have the ability to appeal it or ask it to be set aside or ask for a rehearing or a reconsideration or whatever. But that's what happens. So when you say like, oh, how are they getting away with it? It really is just because they kind of like can, until you get it in front of the judge and get the judge to say this is what should happen. Or you can use your magic bullet. And the magic bullet is your leverage. And how do you create that leverage? Well, let's talk about that. So when you are dealing with a narcissist, they are driven by one thing. Come on, you know what it is. Say it with me. Yup. Narcissistic supply. That's what they're dealing with. That's the only thing they care about. And if you want to know more about narcissistic supply and leverage, you can definitely check out my video on creating leverage. But I'm going to talk more about that here too. Now, I also have a video on narcissistic supply. You should check that out. Narcissistic supply is what feeds that narcissist. It is the only thing they care about. They are literally on the hunt, constantly praying. And I don't mean this kind of praying. I don't mean the one with the A. I meant the one with the E. Like, they're predators. They need to go after you. Whoever it is, whoever's near them, they need to suck as much narcissistic supply from every person and every event that they possibly can. They have no inner sense of value. Zero. So therefore, all of it has to come from the external for them. They're like slapping it on like lacquer, you know, and they are trying to like pretend that they are this big person on campus, the VIP, the most important, because they don't feel any sense of value on the inside. So it all has to come from the outside. And so that's what narcissistic supply is. That's the key. That's the magic bullet. That's where you have to go if you want to create leverage. All right. So in my S.L.A.Y program, I talk about leverage. I talk about developing a super strong strategy, which is what S stands for. I talk about creating invincible leverage, which is what your L is. Anticipating how the narcissist is going to behave and staying 2 steps ahead of them and staying, hey, instead of being behind all the time, being ahead. That's the A. And Y is focusing on you, your case, your position. So important. You don't want to be constantly on the defensive. You want to be on the offensive. Remember, a football team that only has a great defense but no offense means no one's scoring any points, right? So you have to be the one scoring the points. And how you do that is going on the offensive, creating that strategy, creating that leverage, creating that magic bullet. And if you want that magic bullet in your negotiations, I want to see magic bullet in the comments right now. So how do you do that? So one of the things that you've got to understand when it comes to leverage with a narcissist is that there are hierarchies of supply when it comes to narcissists. Some narcissists are driven by certain things. Some narcissists are driven by other things. But there's always going to be a hierarchy of it. Certain forms of supply are definitely going to be worth more to them than other forms of supply. Certainly how they look, their reputation, all of those things are always going to be high levels of supply. And as well as other forms of supply that mean more to them, such as somebody who's more prestigious, or a friendship with somebody who's more powerful, something like that. Those things mean a lot to the narcissist, and they'll protect those things at any cost. So the other forms of supply that they get are, you know, the garden variety stuff that they do all the time, you know, like making you miserable by ignoring court orders, ignoring the terms of a contract, passive aggressive stuff like, you know, you ask them to do something, or they even volunteer to do something, and then they don't do it. And then when you ask them to, you know, how come you didn't do this thing? Then they like act like you are nagging them and you're a pain in the neck. Or they have 50,000 excuses. Narcissists are great at projection. And if you want to fight back against narcissistic projection, you should definitely check out my video on narcissistic projection. But that's what you're going to get, because they get supply from that. Narcissists love making you miserable, seeing you squirm, manipulating you, putting fear in you, making you feel out of control. They love that. So, you know, and by the way, they lose control sometimes too. And if they do, then they do end up collapsing. And if you want to know more about what happens when a narcissist collapses, you should definitely check out my video on what happens when a narcissist collapses. But spoiler alert, it ain't pretty. All right, I'll just say that right now. It ain't pretty, but it does happen. And when you are negotiating with them, you want to get them to a point where they're nervous that their supply source, the one that means more to them to retain, is going to be threatened in some way. Now, you don't actually take it away. That's the key. Unless you have to. You have to be ready to go forward with your threats, by the way. You have to be ready to do that. But the sweet spot is in threatening that source where they feel that you really are going to go forward with what it is that you're saying you're going to do. And then they'll have to make a choice at that point. They'll have to make a choice on letting go of the supply that they get from you in order to keep the supply that means more to them. So that's the magic bullet right there. That's the sweet spot. It's always in threatening some form of narcissistic supply. They don't want to have to let go of any form of supply. So giving up the supply that they get from jerking you around and making you miserable is not going to be easy. They want to hold on to it all. They're like hoarders. I need this supply, and I need that supply, and I need this supply. They need it all. You know, it's like they're like, you know, children or toddlers that have to like keep it all as much as possible. But if they're driven to the brink, they will let go of the supply that they get from making you miserable if they have to. And that's what you will be creating in your S.L.A.Y methodology. When you figure out how to do all of that together, that's when you are ready to slay your negotiation.